look, you don't have to be an expert to teach your kids about money.
Yeah.
Simply talking about money with your kids in a casual way, when you're budgeting, when you're grocery shopping, when you're looking for a car, when you're paying a bill, to invite them into that is literally just normalizing conversations and getting kids to see that money doesn't have to be this scary, unapproachable topic, that it's a part of your life.
What are we teaching them about instant gratification? So what we do is, like, he really wanted this toy, and my husband and I are on the same page. He's like, there's no reason he needs a random toy right now. So we said, hey, look, this is a great idea for your birthday. We don't want to just keep showering and instant gratify him, because I also want to teach him that there is responsibility with our money.
And you brought up the grocery store. It is fertile ground for financial education. Just bring your little kid to the grocery store. They will want for things. Expect that, but you go in with a list and you talk about the list and you give them the list. Correlate what you buy with what your values are, the boundaries that you've designed. And so much of what they learn is just from observation, and we don't even realize it. So just being conscious of that, I think, is an important tip.
Welcome back to the show. If you're watching this, you are tuning in on our YouTube channel, where we are now debuting all of our podcast episodes as well as Saturday educational episodes. So like this video, subscribe to this channel, and leave reviews wherever you can so that we know that you love this podcast. One of my favorite social media follows and podcast host is on today. Farnoosh Torabi, leading financial educator, best-selling author of A Healthy State of Panic, Follow Your Fears to Build Wealth, Crush Your Career, and Win at Life, a mom, and Webby-winning host of the So Money podcast, which is a favorite in our home. And I was actually on that show, is joining me today to talk about navigating a very important thing that all of us have gone through: financial stress in parenting. Thank you so much for coming on my show today, Farnoosh.
Thank you for having me. And I was just in awe of all of your work when you were on my show, getting to talk about your advice for my audience, how to navigate healthcare and
I love it.
motherhood, parenthood, babyhood. You're awesome. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, the love fest is mutual, as you know. I talked about that on your show. The origin story here is that my husband is really into financial podcasts and education. So he found your show. He loves it. He's like, I really think you and her will vibe. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. He's like, no, Mona, like, her book and what she says, like, I feel like I'm listening to you talk, the way you talk, and just
Oh,
the energy you have for the world. And I was like, it's true. We're like vibing. So
we're the same. We're two peas in a pod. You went the medical route. I went to the financial route, but that's so cool. I love to hear that men are listening and enjoying the show. From a female perspective, that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, he was the one who introduced me to your show and who you were. And I was like, oh yeah, this lady is it. Like, I love surrounding myself. I just love surrounding myself with women who are doing this kind of stuff, like wanting to, like, elevate each other, elevate themselves, and help each other kind of be the best version of themselves, whether it's as a mom or whether it's as a professional, which you do. So kudos. I love it.
Thank you.
That is the intro love fest, because I just wanted to share that. But for anyone who's not familiar with who you are, tell us a little bit more about yourself, the work that you do and why you love doing it.
Thank you. So I always say how I arrived at my professional life today as a financial educator, it really, there's two stories, but they merge. I grew up the daughter of Iranian immigrants, and through my parents learned consciously and unconsciously a lot about the financial world. As Middle Easterners, we as a culture typically, I guess compared to American culture, we talk about money more. It's not as taboo in the household. And so, not to say all the conversations were healthy and positive, but I had a lot of early exposure to the money world, whether it was my dad coming home and talking about the stress at work and the potential layoffs, and my mother and my father having disagreements around the budget, and I sort of being around for that, house hunting. There was just a lot that they took me on their journey, and I'm very grateful for it. I didn't know at the time it was going to be such a a defining moment for me, defining moments. And then as I got older, I was thinking about my career. I think I've always loved to be a storyteller. I knew that it's
Yeah.
at my core. And of course, I guess maybe again, the daughter of a Middle Easterner parent, it's always like, well, how are you going to make money? Like, what's the practical side of this ambition? Maybe this is your zone of genius, but also how are you going to get an ROI? And I realized, well, I could tell stories through the lens of personal finance, financial freedom. So I went to journalism school after college, after getting my finance degree, and coupled those two degrees to start right away. In the world of media, financial media, as a journalist, pounding the pavement, telling stories across various mediums. So print,
Yeah.
television, digital. I even was podcasting before podcasting was a thing with an employer at the time. And so got sort of a taste for all the different ways to storytell. And then I got laid off in 2009, as everyone else did, and had to refigure things out. And what I realized was that I wanted to continue doing what I was doing, but independently. Is there a world where I can be Farnoosh
Yeah.
Inc., and not have to be tethered to a desk that belongs to a company, that I can continue to educate and tell stories and be a financial advocate for my audience, but through my own platforms. And so I started to build that out. That was now 15 years ago. And it's just been it's a continuum. I started
Yeah.
with, a book, and then another, and then now I'm my fourth book. And then I started the podcast 10 years ago. And it's just been quite a ride. I love it. I kind of just lean into the audience. Where are they? How do they like to learn? And then showing up for them as prescribed.
I love it. I love hearing people's origin stories. And also, you had to go through a lot of, roller coaster moments.
So
Obviously,
many.
losing your job as, you're speaking about financial stress. You had a family growing up who was, open about all the stresses that happen. So I love this perspective. And, my show is more geared towards parents, parents and the stresses that they may have related to finances or child behavior. Or like I came on your show talking about healthcare woes to you, obviously I know you're working with a lot of different topics and your audience is not only dealing with parental financial stress. What are some of the common financial stresses you see parents in your community or maybe you've gone through, and how does it evolve as a child grows?
I think it's a couple of things.
Mhm.
One is worrying that they may pass on bad financial habits to their children. Most of
Mhm.
us did not grow up in a home where money was a frequent topic, even an approachable topic. I've heard people say, I grew up with this idea that it was rude to talk about money. And
Mm.
so I didn't. And then how does that manifest? Well, now you're an adult having to make financial decisions and not having the language, the confidence, and the curiosity even to begin those important decisions. And as parents, we may not feel so equipped to teach our kids about money for any, whether it's because we don't feel confident or we've made mistakes. I
Yeah.
think who hasn't been through a financial regret or two. And I want to encourage parents in that, if you're feeling that way, to just say, we, look, you don't have to be an expert to teach your kids about money. Uh, Simply talking about money with your kids in a casual way, when you're budgeting, when you're grocery shopping, when you're looking for a car, when you're paying a bill, to invite them into that, and make it sort of, like very casual and very normal. You're normalizing these financial acts. You're bringing your kids in, and that is like more than most kids get. We
Yeah.
are continuing to not talk about money with our children at home. And so it doesn't have to be this built out lesson plan. It doesn't have, you don't have to bring in books or videos. I mean, it's literally just normalizing conversations and getting kids to see that money doesn't have to be this scary, unapproachable topic, that it's a part of your life. So that's one thing, just normalizing communication around money through acts, whether it's like,
Yeah.
again, bringing your kid to the car dealership when you're shopping for a car and explaining kind of how that works. Or when you do have some stress at work, and, making it age appropriate. So if, a 5-year-old won't get that, but maybe a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old would get that. And I think for kids, it's really important at the end of the day that they feel like, despite maybe some of the uncertainties, that mom and dad, the parents, the caregivers have a plan.
Yeah.
So when you're sharing some of the even the harder things, also completing it with by saying like, here's what we're going to do, or here's what I'm thinking, so they don't feel like you're just leaving them with a dot dot dot. That can create a lot of anxiety. I actually wrote a column for 17 magazine during the recession, and a lot of young girls would write in with their money questions, and they had a lot of them, which off the bat just tells you young kids, they're thinking about money. They see things happening in the household. They were seeing their parents get laid off. They were seeing their
Yeah.
parents having trouble to pay the bills. It scared them, but their questions were often, Farnoosh, how can I help them? So your kids, once they get to a certain age, I would say tweens, teenager, we underestimate what they can handle, and they can handle a lot. You can be
Yeah.
honest with them about what's going on, but then coming up with a plan as a family, like here's how we're going to save, or here's how I'm going to get back in the job force. And so they want to feel like there's resolution. The other sort of financial grapple that I think I see a lot of households have around money and with their kids is satisfying their kids' needs,
Mhm.
financial needs today and in the future, and sort of reconciling that with the parents' financial needs now and in the future. And one of the biggest mistakes I often see parents make, and it comes from a good place, they're just trying their best, is they're protecting their children's future over their own future.
Mm.
They're investing in their college savings account for their child before investing in their own retirement accounts.
Mm.
That's a
Interesting.
huge
Yeah.
mistake. It's a huge
Yeah.
I've heard moms and dads proudly, talk about how I fully funded my child's college education. And in the same breath, they'll say, I have no retirement plan now.
Yeah.
Um, and they're sort of basking in the glory of being able to send their kid to college, which is wonderful. And I hope everybody, if that's what one of your goals, to be able to achieve that, but not at the cost of your own financial security in the future. I think that at the end of the day, that's when the parents aren't financially secure, there's a ripple effect as you get
Yeah.
old. Like, look at the sandwich generation, right? Gen X,
Yeah.
largely, and now even some millennials, taking care of their own kids and their parents, because the parents didn't have they prioritized their kids, probably, right? They didn't have proper retirement. They didn't think about their insurance needs in retirement, or their just anything, because they were so wrapped up. And again, as a parent, I get that. I get that. It's also human nature. It's called our inability to delay gratification, wanting to sort of manage and afford what's in front of you today, and at the expense of the future. We're just not, that's not how we're hardwired, to that emphasis. It's hard. It's hard to like get behind that, because why would I? Why would I?
Yeah.
I want what I want now. And my kids, a lot of parents would throw themselves in front of a bus for their kids. You don't think they're going to like fund the 529 before the 401k? Of course, it's a no-brainer. But I want to remind parents of the terrifying reality of then they having to retire one day. Would love for that to happen, but
Yeah.
can't, because they sort of put all their resources towards the kids. And I always say college, it's a huge cost. It's crazy. I hope something changes there in the between now and when my kids go to school. I think
Yeah.
it's very and that's a whole other podcast. There's like a lot of corruption there, I think, like
Yeah. Oh,
financial corruption.
totally. Totally.
Like my son and I were talking today. He's like, he was like, he's in elementary school, and he's like, why do I have to like learn this? I said, good point. You will never need to know this in real life, whatever he was learning in math. But then, I have a babysitter who's in high school, and she's also like, why do I have to learn that? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think that the education is a for-profit system, and
Oh, yes.
keeping you in school for as long as possible, taking weird classes that don't mean anything at the end of the day. Um, you know, I
I know this is a tangent, but I've always told my husband that it's all by design to promote capitalism, right? You
yeah,
pay the loans, you go to school, you pay the loans, you are told that this is why you do it. You get all this debt, whether it's from whatever you do, undergrad, med school, whatever you end up doing. And then you end up working to pay off the debt. because you're like, this is kind of what I'm supposed to do. But I agree with you. That is a whole other episode. But there is a whole future that I think needs to be rehauled. And I think your comment is right that a lot of the perception I feel around this is that parents sometimes feel by talking about these issues, like your parents did to you, like you do for your children, like the financial struggles or financial reality, and bringing them into your world, is that we are bringing them into adult problems a little bit prematurely. But like you said, it's important to kind of bring it up in a developmentally appropriate way. And just, how I do it with my 4.5-year-old is when we go to the grocery store, that's where we do a lot of shopping. And right now, at the time of this recording, it's very expensive. We know that groceries are very expensive. And although we could probably afford things, when he asked to buy this random umbrella that he doesn't really need, I say, hey, sweetie, I see that you really want the umbrella, but at this point, I don't think we really need it. So we're not going to buy it. Or he wants like a sticker book. I give this example because I have means to buy him a sticker book, meaning this like sticker by number book he likes. But I also need to teach him resourcefulness that, sweetie, although we can buy that, right now I need you to finish the one you have. When you show
Right.
me that you've finished, then we can buy it. And then as he gets older, he has a little piggy bank, maybe allowances, like we'll start incorporating that. But it is possible to teach with these little micro moments of like
Mhm.
finances. And we're really big on that because we have privilege. And I think you do, like me and my husband are physicians. We have money to be able to spend discretionarily, and that I understand completely as a privilege. We've paid off our loans, we've done that, but I still want to raise a child who understands that there is hard work that goes behind making this money, and that you're not going
Right.
to get everything kind of handed to you, that we got to work for this. Mommy and daddy are working for it. Everybody is working for money right now. And it doesn't mean that just because you want something that you're going to get. And I think you alluded to that, right? Like, I think a lot of, from what I'm seeing, is that parents need to differentiate between what is actually needed for your child versus what is it that they want, right? Like,
Yeah.
so much of that is like, well, my kid really wanted this toy. Okay, but if you can afford it, great. But even if you can't afford it, what are we teaching them about instant gratification? So what we do is like, he really wanted this toy, and my husband and I are on the same page. He's like, there's no reason he needs a random toy right now. So we said, hey, look, this is a great idea for your birthday. Like, we can get it for your birthday, we can get it for Christmas because we do celebrate Christmas, but we don't want to just keep showering and instant gratify him, because I also want to teach him that there is responsibility with our money, and it's not that you get things when you want it. And even mommy and daddy with Amazon Prime need to control ourselves sometimes and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
there's no instant gratification, that it's going to take a week to get this item, or maybe let's go to the store so that you understand the transaction that happens when you have to pay money for things, rather than go online, buy it, and it's here in a day, which I think is so healthy for parents to kind of think about, even if they have the means.
Yeah. Yeah, the kids are watching,
Yeah.
and so much of what they learn is just from observation, and we don't even realize it. So just being conscious of that, I think, is an important tip. You remind me of another kind of financial conundrum that I think families have. It starts young, but especially when they get a little bit older, like high school, and now they're socializing more than ever, and they are sizing each other up
Yeah.
based on the brand names and the did you go to this concert and what are you doing for summer camp? And I think it gets even more stressful for families, especially those that don't have like all the income, but even those that do, you have to make choices. It's like, to your point, one choice means not making another choice. Financial decisions carry trade-offs,
Yeah.
and there's so much power in being able to delay your gratification. Studies show that just waiting a little bit to get something, you'll appreciate that item so much more. Even
Yep.
just waiting in line for a concert, they have done the studies, as opposed to just walking in and like getting right to your seat. There is so much to relish in those like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. There are memories created, and it builds up the anticipation for the concert. And so they've studied people who have gone through that, and they end up actually having a better time at the concert. And they equate it to just having a little bit of distance
Yes.
and building up that anticipation for something that you really, really want. It is invaluable. But for parents who have these tweens and these teens who want for everything, and now with social media, TikTok, I mean, the lines at Sephora have never been longer, and
Yeah.
most of their customers are highly unqualified to shop there. Like, I'm
Yes.
sorry, if you're 11, you don't need retina, or like
Yeah.
you don't need blush and lipstick and all the things and skincare. I mean, it's like, really? You're destroying your skin actually. Your
Right.
skin is at its prime right
Like, I
now.
want your glowy do goo I want your
Yeah, this is
glowy
and I've
dewy
talked to
skin.
dermatologists about this. They're like, "This is like we all want the 11-year-old, 12-year-old
Yeah,
skin,
before
and
the
now they're
puberty
just
hits.
ruining it and
Yeah,
stacking it, piling it with all this gunk." And, capitalism's not gonna stop that. So,
yep,
my advice to parents there is this is a really great time to incorporate, if you haven't yet, an allowance system, or, of course, when they're older, to go get a job and to not just have an allowance for the sake of an allowance to make money, but to have some rules and boundaries around that to kind of create some friction and
yeah,
to put a lot of these wants in their domain. And
yeah.
so, fine, you want to go to that concert, you want to go to get those tennis lessons, you want to get that new bike, you want to get that tumbler, what is it? Gosh, now it's not cool anymore, but those water
Oh, the
coolers,
Stanley? The
the
Stanley Cup?
Stanley,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Which apparently I heard
Yeah.
is not like the it thing anymore.
It's not yeah.
It's the Odwalla ones now from Target, but you know what I mean, and so
Yeah,
giving them financial runway to now have to make these decisions and realize the limitations of their money, and then they will fail, they will have moments when they will regret and make mistakes. Let them. Let
yeah,
them fail now with their quote unquote budgets. I mean, I've even heard some and I don't know about this, but take it with a grain of salt, but some families that these are especially families of means, like a rich entrepreneur type, these guys on TikTok, and they're like, in my household, my teens, we itemize all their expenses, their food, their clothing, everything that that the parents were taking care of. Now we give them that money. So what, like $1,200 a month or whatever it is, and that's like whatever it is. I'm just making up a random number,
yeah,
but now they have to go and tackle these line items on their own. And initially, of course, they're going to run short. They're going to they get excited with the $1,200. They go buy things and they realize, oh my gosh, I don't have food to buy at school. I don't have money for lunch money or whatever. And I have to pack my lunch, or I don't have gas money. So I have to get a ride or ride my bike to school. Wonderful. I think that's like on the extreme end of it. I don't know about giving like a kid that much money um, every month.
yeah,
But I think there's a lesson in that. So my advice to parents is craft it however you want. It should align with your values as a household. Some families don't like to give money for chores because they say, well, the chores should just be what you do as a member of our family. I get that. So don't attach it to chores, attach it to projects. I
right.
love this idea of kids coming up to the parents and saying, um, the basement is a mess. I want to organize it. Or, mom, your office could use like a spruce up, or
Yeah,
there's a lot of weeds in the backyard. I'm going to create a work plan, a scope of work that you're encouraging entrepreneurship here, essentially.
right.
And then they come up with a price, you negotiate the price, the kid handles it and there's a deadline. And I love that. I mean, I would probably do that on top of, in our household, some chores tied to allowance to money, but meet your kid where they're at. You will quickly learn what kind of financial kid you have. And that's important because then you can maybe course correct, or you can emphasize certain things, or you can double down on other habits that are really good. Like my daughter, I already know she is easy. She's okay with delaying gratification. She doesn't love it, but she loves the idea of like accumulating money. Like that
Yeah,
actually makes her, she's into it.
like
My,
saving, like
my
having it
son,
just yeah,
yeah,
in a
whereas my son, he just wants to spend, 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 spend,
ah,
spend. And he also has ADHD. And I do think that's correlated. I
yeah,
do think that, he's more impulse driven. And that shows up in all aspects of your life: school, money, friendships, food. I don't have to tell anybody who's listening who has ADHD how that can manifest. So I know this. And so, we work with him differently on that versus maybe his sister who needs she could use a lesson in, spending a little bit. Like, it's okay.
right.
You should get
It's a
what you should
balance.
make a plan. And
Yeah,
you brought up the grocery store. It is fertile ground for financial education. Just bring your little kid to the grocery store. They will want for things. Expect that, but you go in with a list and you talk about the list and you give them the list. Have
yeah,
them go shopping for you. And of course, they put all the like stuff that kids want on the lower shelves. So they're going to grab for that box of cookies, which maybe you already have at home, or, you have a policy at home where we don't eat sweets during the week. I don't know. So correlate what you buy with what your values are, the boundaries that you've designed, or, and I think what the best advice I heard from a lot of the kid and money experts that I've had on my podcast is this idea of telling your kids we can't afford that, which may be true,
Right. Right.
is not the healthiest message. Instead, you could say, this isn't a priority for us.
Mhm.
Or if you want this, that's fine. Put it on a list and we're going to work towards it.
I love it.
Don't leave it as like a dead end, because those kids who grow up have a scarcity mindset. And
Mhm.
they tend to be the ones that grow up as adults to feel like, um, they create narratives in their mind like, well, that's just not going to be for me. That's just not something that we afford or I can afford. Whereas, even with a family where there's limitations and limited resources, there is a way to raise a child who sees the world as abundant, because you have done the work of showing them how to plan and prepare and afford something in the future. You're talking about trade offs, you're bringing it back to your values. So whether you live paycheck to paycheck or you make seven figures, everybody has to make choices.
Yeah.
Every choice comes at a cost. I think that's important to relay in a way that where the kid gets it. And again, a grocery store visit is great. I was in Macy's last weekend with my daughter, and she wanted to buy a headband. She doesn't need a headband. She's got a million headbands. Um, and I just said, I think we should save our money instead. And I wasn't sure how she was gonna take it, but she was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Because again, this is my saving daughter, she gets it. With my son, I may have said, "You know what? Um, do you really need that? You know, do you have so many whatever, let's say he wants a headband too, you have so many headbands." Or I would say,
Yeah.
"If you really, really want it, because it's nothing like you have, then we need to talk about how you're gonna use your allowance to save up for it."
I love this. I mean, I think this is so healthy. And I, by the way, think grocery shopping, taking kids to grocery stores are probably the most amazing experience, not only for the financial aspect, but also just for the like for young kids, especially the exposure to food. Like I literally say every kid should, if a parent can, take your kid grocery shopping because they might pick out a fruit they like, they might pick out a vegetable they like.
Yeah.
And then we talk about it from a financial space. And one of the biggest things when I grew up, I remember learning about is unit prices. And when you go grocery shopping, right? I actually still to this day look at the unit price, which is we see when you go on a label, you see the regular price, but a unit price is how much it costs per the ounce of an item. So you have to
Yeah.
look at unit prices. And I teach my son about unit prices because I
So
learned that
great.
growing up. And he now will look at, he can't read numbers completely, but he can make out like basic stuff. And he's like, oh, mommy, let's get this. But again, this is planting those seeds early. And I love that you brought up whether you have seven figures or whether you're living paycheck to paycheck, because it is really important to create this for whoever. And I love that you're also encouraging us not to create the scarcity mindset, and that mindfulness shift and that terminology shift to what to say instead of I can't afford it is huge. What advice would you give for parents dealing with financial stress, and particularly when they're trying to shield their children from the pressures, or basically maybe even show up for their children as like mindful parents without having that anxiety or worry? Like, what would you say for those parents struggling with this that just want to be able to live with their kids and be parents, but
Yeah.
are struggling financially?
Well, I would say focus on you and
Mhm.
getting you oops, focus on you and getting you in a better place. So if you
Yeah.
have financial stress, I mean, talk therapy is really helpful, but also you want to feel more in control. Like that's kind of sometimes what the stress is telling you, is that you have felt a loss of control in your
Mhm.
financial life. So how can you bring that back into your life? Does it mean automating some bills? Does it mean working with a credit counselor? Does it mean
Yeah.
trying to bring in more money so that you can support some of these other things that are hanging over? Is it trying to get out of debt and focusing primarily on that? Is it something to do with you and your partner not being on the same page? So I would say worry less about how am I going to communicate this to the kids, and more about you being able to show up yourself as your best self in your life. Like nothing's perfect and things are always a work in progress, but kids, they receive their cues from the parents. And honestly, if your child is of age of, like, I would say a tween or a teenager, and you're feeling a little bit of stress, again, I experienced this as a kid growing up. I saw the stress, and I saw sometimes where it wasn't resolved, and then I saw them actually take action. And so a healthy way to bring this into your child's life in an honest way, because they're noticing. And what you don't want is for them to create a narrative that isn't true,
Yeah.
right? That you want to be in control of that narrative and honest about that with them. So it could be like, things are a little tough right now. As you know, my hours cut back, or things are costing more, inflation, blah, 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 rent went up. So here's the plan. We have a plan for this. And sometimes it's going to be hard, and we want everyone to help out. How would, maybe you can give your child something to do to feel like they're contributing. Because again, that's what they want. The letters I got while I was at 17 Magazine as an editor, is it even around anymore, 17
I don't even
Magazine?
know.
I
I
mean,
remember
maybe it's a
reading that thing
website
so
as
much.
all
Yeah.
the, but
Yeah.
it was awesome to see
Yeah.
these young girls. And by the way, 17 Magazine readers are not 17, they're 12.
Right.
They're
Right. Right.
13, and they're writing in and they're saying, I noticed my mom is stressed about money. She's not talking about it with me, but I know because, like, I'm old to know. I'm
Yeah.
old enough to know. I think that's just, we have to remember our kids are more capable and smarter than sometimes we give them credit. And I just want to help. So maybe it's that she gets a babysitting job and contributes some of that money to pay some bills, or she's just more conscious around the house of conserving energy and using up the food before getting more food, and maybe selling some clothes. There's so many things as a family you can do that are
Yeah.
actually great things to get in the habit of doing forever. And if a crisis and a financial stress is when you start to practice those things, I mean, that's kind of a silver lining.
Well, I love that you brought up the taking care of self, because when we're parents, we tend to obviously focus on our kids' needs and wants, which is normal. I mean, obviously, that's what we want to do. But when you're in any situation, and especially in a financial burden situation, looking out for your well being, you brought up earlier about in terms of saving for yourself and your retirement versus putting money into a child's college education, how helpful that can be. But one of the things that I hear and I see, and I'm wondering if you see this, like the culture of like keeping up with the Joneses, right? So just say a family is living in this community or has this sort of, financial status that they're in, and then they themselves go through a financial burden and they live in this community where people are whatever more affluent than they are. Do you find that that contributes a lot to how the parents approach these financial stressful situations, like this, well, now we can't do this and your peers are able to do this, and if so, how can we navigate that, like,
Mhm.
it's such a hard situation that
Well,
I sometimes see.
I feel like I lived that when I was in high school. We moved to the suburbs of Philadelphia, the main
Hmm.
line, high
Yeah.
income. And my parents and we rented an apartment. It was a 2-bedroom. There were 4 of us. My brother was 3, 4 years old. He slept in my parents' room for many of those years. They thankfully gave me my own room because I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
But that was hard. That was a
Yeah.
real sort of, what the heck is going on? I came from previously a community that was more middle class, and there wasn't such a divide, where
Yeah.
there were the rich people and then everybody else. But here in this town, day one, I was like, whoa, I'm taking the bus, and most kids are being driven to school, or they have their own BMWs, their own
Wow.
new
Yeah.
cars. And it was a public school, but it was, again, in a very, like, sort of tax rich town. And I will say that, and like, maybe it's just myself, but I'll try to extrapolate and give, maybe there's some big tips here for families that are in this. And I mean, talk about trying to keep up with the Joneses. I saw my parents struggle with that on their own level.
Yeah.
But for me as the kid, I think that coming home to my family, who was very clear on values and objectives, and the reason we were even there was because my parents were trying to start a business
Hmm.
and had partnered with some friends. It didn't work out, but I saw my dad work his tail off. I saw him
Yeah.
try to do that while also maintaining his full-time job in the other state where we were previously living, and commuting back and forth. And so I saw that, like, even for what we had, which relatively was less, far less than what my classmates had in terms of house size and
Yeah.
resources and access to things. I saw how hard my parents worked. My mother took part-time jobs. She was working at the mall. She was an engineer before, but she just needed to do
Yeah.
what she needed to do to quickly start making money for the family. And I think I witnessing that was like, oh, I can't be a snob right now. Like my
Yeah.
parents are in it. And I had to almost condition myself, like, to kinda look for the bright spots. When I go to school and it's easy to kinda get down on, like, "Oh, I don't have this, and these kids
Mhm.
are, like, they're spending their weekends in New York, the camps, and this and that." The tutors, I didn't have any tutors, I wish. But just being exposed to that lifestyle was such an eye opener.
Yeah.
Like, I'd never seen rich people up close so intimately in my
Right.
life, every day, and the things they took for granted, but also the things they really, really worked hard for.
Mhm.
So I saw a lot of privilege, but I also was like, maybe it was just my own curiosity and introspection, but I would see these how where it came from.
Yeah.
The wealth didn't just like some of it was generational, but some of it was like their parents started businesses, their parents saved, and it was inspiring. I will say it allowed me to see what was possible and what comes with wealth, what comes with having resources. And I wanted for that, but not in a way where I would go home and go, "Oh, can I get the newest this?" I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to work my tail off to get into a good college and I'm going to shoot for the stars
I love
more
it.
than I'd ever tried to before." And so now when I have conversations with parents, I'm, an adult woman now with 2 kids, and I hear sometimes from other parents in our town, "Oh, we have to move out of here. Everyone here is just so wealthy." I don't see it that way. I see wealthy people. I mean,
Yeah.
Montclair, New Jersey, where I live, yeah, it's 13 miles from New York City. There's more wealthy here than maybe other parts of New Jersey, but it is very diverse economically, socioeconomically. And I always am reminded of like when I grew up exposed to rich people and how that was almost inspiring to me.
Mhm.
And I think because I also had a very anchored home life,
Yes.
um,
Oh,
it
thanks for
has to
bringing
go
it back
hand in
to parenting.
hand.
Yeah, it does because
It came down to good parenting.
yeah.
And listen, my mom and I are very young, are very short, our distance in age is very small, so she's
Mhm.
19 years older than me. So when I was 15, she was 34.
Wow. Wow.
Can you
Yeah.
like, younger than I am now. So she had
I
a
know.
15-year-old, and so she's in her 30s.
Mhm.
And, of course, being influenced, right? Like, all
Yeah.
her friends are also wealthy. So I remember she worked. She got a full-time job at the mall and was like, "Okay, if I wanna buy myself a purse, it's coming out of my bank account. I don't wanna
Yeah.
have to, like, ask your dad for permission to do this." So I saw how she was making it work for herself, and that was an education.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't want for things.
One of the biggest things that I loved from my childhood, I have immigrant parents who, again, a lot of my peers were also immigrants, right? I grew up in Southern California, went to a predominantly immigrant child school, meaning all of our parents immigrated Indian, Chinese, Korean, whatever it is. And my parents, we grew up in that same diverse socioeconomic status. So you had people who maybe were lower middle class, very wealthy in our school system. And one of the biggest things is, yes, the anchor of the home. And there was never for my parents, even if they were going through financial struggles, because my dad was in the in the computer industry, which was like actually very volatile in the 90s. And so he had
Oh,
amazing jobs.
same. Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
And
You're
he was a
maybe they
computer
worked
engineer.
together at some point.
Yeah.
I
He
feel
was a computer engineer and he would lose his job, get another job, lose his job. Like he never had stability with his job. And it was very hard for me to see this. But what my parents taught me was one, my mom was in the healthcare field. So yes, they did teach me about financial security, like looking for job, they wanted me to be secure and like, hey, think about a job that can be enjoyable to you that can also lead to financial security. But one of the biggest things they taught was even when we were going through all that, there was no comparison and envy for other people. So just say we went to someone else's house that had a in-ground pool or had something bigger. It was never like talking negatively about other people's wealth or other people. It was joyous about other people, right? Like, hey, we're at this event and this is great. And kind of what you said, it raised me with this mentality that things are possible. Not that
right.
I don't have this and you have that. It was, hey, we can work towards this. And my family may not
Yes.
have an in-ground pool. My family may not have the ability to buy Nike clothes for me, and I'm wearing like high water pants because they're hand-me-downs and my mom and dad can't really afford to buy all that stuff. But they built so much self-worth in me, and so much like, you're amazing, you're doing wonderful with what you have, you're very smart, you're kind, you have qualities that make you great. That it wasn't about, well, you are worthy because you have the car, or you are worthy because you have this. And then I grew up with that. And then now when I actually have an income and have means, I still have that worth. Right. I don't need to
Yeah.
spend that money to show someone that I'm worthy. Right. Because I have that. And so you're right, Farnoosh. It comes down to the parenting unit. And I say this so deeply because I work with a large socioeconomic diversity population, like meaning in my patient population, I have families who are living paycheck to paycheck. Moms are working 4 different jobs. And then I have people who are entrepreneurs. And I can honestly say that sometimes the happiest ones are the ones working 4 jobs. And I say that because it's their mindset. They
Yeah.
understand what is the values in my family? What am I teaching? They are the more well, sometimes the more well-adjusted ones who are not living in this comparison zone, but like this is what I can afford for my family. This is what I'm going to raise my kids with. And it's such an important message because it isn't about having X amount or this amount. It's how you approach it in your house with the resources you have.
Yeah. I mean, really what they're exhibiting is an awareness of what
Yeah.
is enough for them. And
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
not saying like they're settling. We don't like the word enough in our capitalist culture. We think
mhm.
it's selling out, so we never want to think about our financial life in those terms, but it's healthy. It's important to know,
Yeah.
you know, m- to a certain extent. I mean, the studies have been done. Yes, we need to be making a certain amount of money. There's like, n- the old study said 75,000 and I think now it's like six figures, but there's a certain amount of money that everybody can hopefully make to sort of feel like they have enough for eh, their the basic resources,
Of course,
food,
which
healthcare,
has gotten
housing.
worse. Yeah, I know. It totally.
But
Mhm.
it's not like someone making $1 million a year, that's going to make them happier than someone who's making $100,000 a year. I think it's to your point, your inner sense of self-worth. And I always say, and this is getting off topic a little bit, but for the entrepreneurs out there who are always like trying to just make more than last year because that to them is a metric of success,
Mhm.
I say you got to stop that. It's a
Yeah,
hamster wheel because
yeah.
you need to figure out, you got to get close to your numbers, figure out what's enough for you and your family. Because there's more to life than like just work, work, work and make, like
Right.
you have to, there's so much more to life, right? And you want to create the space and the time and the energy to do those things. Um, and feel like, okay, well, I have enough over here so I can go focus also on these other relationships, activities, self-improvement, family, travel. That's what life's about.
It is. Oh, yes. And one my last question for you, because I could talk to you about this for a long time, and I think we could, but besides we talked about chores, we talked about projects, which I love that delineation because I also personally don't think we'll do give money for chores, but we will do probably the project situation you recommended. Taking to the grocery store, all the things we mentioned. Is there anything else when parents are feeling like they're in financial strain, or just in general, how we can teach children healthy financial habits from a young age? And I know this could be a whole episode, but maybe your biggest pearl to take home this episode.
I think fostering their curiosity around money is
Mhm.
so, so important. And kids will start to ask questions about money. Sometimes they will not be questions that we want to invite into our
Yeah.
lives because it's complex or, oh my gosh, it brings up stuff for us. So, but as young as 5, 6 years old, once they start going to school and really socializing and talking to friends about how was your weekend and, oh, going to birthday parties and going on play dates and realizing that not everybody has the same life, not everybody has the same things, they start to get curious about it. And I want
Yeah.
parents to not shut down those questions or say, that's not a good question, or don't worry about that. Like, for example, my son said to me the other day, um, are we rich?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
You're like, "Whoa."
I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, and I the best advice I
Yeah.
have received and I will give is that when your kids ask you a question that sort of unsettles you, don't answer it. Ask them more about their curiosity and where it's
Yeah.
coming from. And so the next question for me is, that's an interesting question. What makes you curious?
Mhm.
And then I learn that there's a backstory to this question. And
Yeah.
every backstory might be different, but his was, well, we had just come back from a play date at a friend's house who has a lot more stuff than him, bigger
Mhm.
house, more toys, and he is now that's now his sort of like a definition of rich, like
Yeah.
a kid who has a lot of things. And so I said, your friend has a great life. Like his family, is very generous. They've invited us over. They're very hospitable. They have lots of cool things. It's very exciting to go over to their home. And then the next question he said, well, why don't we have a pool?
Yep.
They have a pool. And I said, well, it's not important to us as your dad and I decided like we didn't want a house with a pool. That was not important to us. We would rather use the money that we might put to have and maintain a pool towards other things. And let
Mhm.
me tell you that, I'm not going to answer whether we're rich or not because I think what you're trying to get at is like how much money we have versus
Yeah.
somebody else. And I'll tell you, our definition of rich in this household is, a measure of your health,
Yes.
the love you feel. There's so many things that define rich, and money's important, but it's not the only thing.
Right.
And I feel rich. Do you feel rich? Throw it back to the kid. Do you feel rich? Once you've explained what rich really means, because that's true. I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
make things up. It's like true, right? We know this as mature adults. So tell that to your kid. And I said, if you want a pool when you get older, you should get that pool. You should get that pool. And whatever you see right now that you want, know that it's possible. Whether we get it or not as your parents is up for debate. But, it's all coming down to like what we perceive as valuable to us. And that's how the world goes around. Like that's
Yeah.
it. And I think he's 10, he was 9 at the time. He gets it. But we had a conversation about it. It lasted several minutes, and it wasn't
Yeah.
where a parent could be like, "That's a silly question," or you could say, "I don't know." Who knew?
Or
Like
don't
I
ask us that, right? Like you could shut it
and
down.
honestly,
Yeah.
I didn't have a good answer right in the spot, but
Yeah.
I wanted to just give myself some time. So I asked him more questions, fostering the curiosity and letting him know that nothing is off the table when it comes to talking about money. Because when they're asking questions about money, they're asking questions about relationships,
Mhm.
earning, work, money. It's not about money, right? It's about everything else. And that's why I love talking about money because then you can get into so many different areas.
Yeah.
It is a Pandora's box. And so fostering curiosity around money with your kids is so important because when they get older, they're going to have questions and they should be able to feel confident to ask them and to go get those answers.
I love it, and also be able to come back to you to ask those questions, right?
Yes.
I think it's so healthy, and like we talk about with secure attachment, I talk a lot about developmental secure attachment, but this is part of it, right? That our kids are gonna grow up. We've fostered this foundation. We've taught them about whatever we teach them about, including money. And then when they get older and they have those tough financial decisions, they will figure it out, but they know that you are also someone who gets it, who can help them in terms of figuring out solutions if they feel stuck. And I think it's such a healthy relationship. And Farnoosh, you gave all these pearls for parenting, and I love it because, again, I am a parenting podcast, and to tie in the parenting and the finance is so healthy and appropriate, and I love it. What would be your final uplifting message? So I have my guests come on and share something to tie in this conversation, leave people feeling motivated and empowered. What would you say to our community today?
I would say wherever you feel on the financial spectrum, know that your kids are watching, but that's an opportunity, right? We have an opportunity to educate our kids on the go. And sometimes it's very intentional and sometimes it's just on the go, but use all the moments as opportunities to teach your kids about money, fostering the curiosity, showing your mistakes, owning up to your mistakes, talking about the challenges, but also talking about your plans. Listen, most kids don't get an ounce of financial conversation at
Yeah.
home. So
Yeah.
just doing that, your kid is going to be leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else when they're your age, simply because they've had the good foundation of knowing that money is not a taboo topic and you gave them that gift.
And you gave us that gift today, Farnoosh. Thank you. I love it. I love this conversation. Where can people go to stay connected in terms of finding out your
Well,
podcast and your
join me
resources?
on my podcast, So Money.
Yeah.
3 days a week. Fridays, I answer audience questions. So if you've got a question for me, you can send it in. I talk about how to do it on the podcast. You can follow me on Instagram. And yeah, I mean the books but once you listen to the podcast, you'll get the rest from there. But has been so great. I love chatting with you. Let's not wait too long to do it again.
Absolutely. I mean, we could go into a whole thing about all these other, getting into the nitty gritty of every question we ask. And I know this is going to be a long term relationship.
Yes.
I adore you not only again for your advice on finances, like you perfectly said, it permeates every aspect, including parenting. So, which is why I really wanted you on the show. And thanks again. I'm going to be linking everything, and I cannot wait to watch your journey as you help so many more people. I'm so glad you got laid off in 2009 so
Me
that you could
too.
be this person for us. Thank you, recession.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you again. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this conversation, make sure to hit that thumbs up sign, share this episode on your social media channels, and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on all future episodes and our weekly educational videos. Have questions or comments? Make sure to comment below, and I'll see you all next time. Stay well, stay loved, and keep on shining.